Shalom, everyone. My name is Ian Michaels of Congregation Beit Menucha, the House of Restoration out of Southeast Missouri. And I'm going to make a short video today and perhaps some other videos later on to follow up on this. It is something that needs to be addressed, and that is that there's a number of teachers out there that are vehemently coming against the teachings of Yeshua and the Tanakh, containing information about how he is the Messiah and what identifying marks we should be looking for to find the Messiah. And so I'm going to start off with, first of all, what they call the myth of the virgin birth. I am doing this in defense of my Messiah and also in defense of a good friend of mine by the name of Carmen Welker, who has been under extreme attack by some supposedly learned rabbis. So it is to you that I address this to, and also to your followers, Rabbi Tovia Singer, Rabbi Michaels Scobac, Nehemiah Gordon, and Jono Vandor of Truth to You Radio. I hope to give you something to think about, something for your disciples to think about as well. Isaiah 7:14 says, "A virgin shall conceive and bear a son." Of course, the Hebrew says that it's Alma, which is young maiden, and not a specific term, Betula, virgin. But we have to consider why it was that Isaiah used that term, which was not so specific to a virgin. Of course, because there was a child that would be born in the days of Isaiah, Im Anuel. This child would be born, and he of course, his mother would not be a virgin, because there would be a man involved in bringing the child about. But there's another reason why Alma was used, and I think you'll find it very interesting to know that Alma is also the word for eternity in the Aramaic. So hold that thought, we'll come back to that. Also, we need to consider the fact that no one can add to or take away from the Torah, and that includes all the prophets. That includes everybody. Nobody can add to or take away from anything that's written in the books of Moses, according to Deuteronomy 12, verse 32. So, if in fact the virgin birth is an identifying mark that we need to be looking for in the Messiah, whoever he is, we're going to find it in the Torah. So we're going to bring this argument back to a Torah framework. And what we do is we're going to use what's considered a Jewish hermeneutic called Gezerah Shiva, which is an analogy by common term. We're going to go back and find out, where was Alma used first. We find it was used first in Genesis 24, verse 16. And in this verse we find this. This is about the story of Rebekah. It says, "And the damsel, Alma, was very fair to look upon, a virgin, Betula, neither had any man known her, and she went down to the well and filled her pitcher and came up." Now, the very first time Alma is used, we see it attached to the word Betula. This is very interesting. But I'm going to take you to another level of something, and that has to do with what was called a phenomenon some 30 years ago, something that was discovered by mathematical scholars at the Hebrew University. They share their information with the Harvard and Yale scholars of math. In our computer age, this is something that was discovered, something that was always there, something that was penned when the authors were writing the scriptures, and of course they had no idea they were doing it. There are equidistant letter sequences embedded in the text. This is what was discovered. Embedded messages which are coherent to what you're reading about. All right? The mathematicians determined that this was beyond human capability. It was beyond chance. It was what they said was greater than a 1 in 50 quadrillion possibility that it was by chance or by manipulation of man. All right? In this verse, Genesis 24:16, we happen to have one of those equidistant letter sequences. It is found in "to the well." The word in Hebrew is ha'ana. It is a 386 letter skip. Right? This is what we find in ha'ana. In verse 16, in the ayin, starting with ha'ana, counting 386 letters back, left to right, backwards, we find a vav in the word vayelek in verse 10. 386 letters back from there, In the word Yoshev, there's a shin in verse 3. 386 letters back from that, there's a yud in V'nechet in Genesis 23:16. These letters spell the name Yeshua. Now, understand, there is a numerous amount of these occurrences. This is just one, right? Another thing to add on top of this is the fact that the 386 number happens to be the standard gematria for the letters, for the numerical value of the letters in the name Yeshua. Okay, so this just sort of increases the improbability of something like this happening. You see, the Yud is 10, the Shin is 300, the Vav is 6, and the Ayin is 70. So that's 386. In addition to that, as if that wasn't enough, the letters that are adjacent to his name are the letters which make up the name Yonah. Now, the significance of this, of course, is that when religious leaders asked Yeshua, give us a sign, show us a sign that you have authority to do the things that you're doing, his answer was, no sign will be given this generation, but the sign of Yonah. Of course, Jonah was in the belly of a fish for 3 days and 3 nights, so he was speaking of his death and resurrection. In addition to that, it was Yochanan, the immerser, who said, I saw the Spirit descend upon him like a Yonah, a dove, when he was coming up out of the Yarden River after his mikvah. So I find that to be incredibly interesting. There also, we were going to go on and talk about the fact that Isaiah 7:14 has also an equidistant letter sequence in it. And that is this. From the Mem, in Ha'alma, it's a 17-letter skip. Now, you can do this yourself. If you have a Hebrew Bible, you can do this yourself, and you'll find the same thing that I have found. Right? 17-letter skip from right to left spells Mashiach. All right? In addition to that, going the opposite direction from the Mem, left to right, we have the word kavan, which means sacrificial bread. All right? So, the Mem in Alma, Ha'alma, verse 14. There's a Shin in Shemo in verse 14. Exactly 17 letters. 17 letters from that. A Yud in Yochel in verse 15. And then a Chet in Uvachor in also verse 15. The opposite direction, you'll find a Kaf in Mikem in verse 13. A Vav in Talu, verse 13. And finally, the Nun of Kavan in Adonai in verse 14 of the previous chapter. So, this is an amazing thing. How is this possible? And you need to think about it. If you're going to come up with some alternative reason as to why this is there, well, it won't be a very scholarly one. All right? You can come up with some kind of answer, but I'd be very interested to hear what you have to say. All right? The only proper response to this information is to fall down on your knees and give glory to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob for his sovereignty, how he is watching over even the writing of his word. This is the word. This is his word, right? It gives a whole new meaning to the word inspired word. When you realize that the men that were writing these books had no idea that when they were finished writing this, they would have the name Yeshua and the word Mashiach included in places where we would expect to find it, coherent to the face text that we're reading. Okay, so going back to the word Alma and how it has the meaning of eternity in Aramaic. All right, well, this is interesting. If eternity conceives and bears a son, this reminds me of Micah chapter 5, verse 1 in the Hebrew Bible and verse 2 in the English. But this is where it says that out of Israel, the one who is born in Bethlehem, the ruler of Israel, he will be born in Bethlehem. He will rule Israel, and his goings forth have been from eternity, Olam. Olam in Hebrew, Alma in Aramaic. Interestingly, this also has one of those equidistant letter sequences. All right, now if you could appreciate numbers, I'll give you the numbers first. It's a 77-letter verse, exactly 77 Hebrew letters. The equidistant letter sequence is the product of 7 times 7. All right, 7 is the number of perfection. So you have double perfection, you actually have it quadrupled with a 49-letter skip that spells out Yeshua's name. That's right. It's in the 6th word. You can look this up for yourself. It's the fourth yud in the verse. It's in the 6th word, verse 2 or 1 in the Hebrew Bible. And you're going to find it in Vayeter, then a Shin in Moshel in verse 1, and a Vav in Ve'atar. It's the first letter of the first word in that verse. And then finally, an Ayin in Atah, the first letter of the 14th verse. You're going to be going, if you want to do this yourself, make sure that you start with the 4th yud in Micah 5:1, where it talks about the one who will be born in Bethlehem to rule Israel. Start with the 4th yud and go from left to right, and you will see Yeshua spelled out. So I'm going to, like I said, there's a lot more that can be said about the identifying mark of a virgin birth, which I'm going to cover in part 2, possibly even the 3rd part, because it is extensive. But this is just enough to give you to chew on. Hopefully it will make an impression on someone's mind, something to think about, something to search out. Be scholarly about this. Obviously, there's a reason why these codes are embedded. Man had nothing to do with it. So why is it there? And how? Unless, of course, Elohim wants you to know without a shadow of a doubt that it is Yeshua, HaNetzeret, Yeshua of Nazareth, who is the promised Messiah. Thank you for listening, and we'll do this again real soon. Shalom.